In this lecture, we will introduce some additional tools that are available to us in Visual Basic.
We'll start by taking a look at radio buttons. First of all, what are radio buttons? Well, radio buttons basically give us this set of mutually exclusive options. So the idea is we can have multiple radio buttons that the user can click on, and these radio buttons would be actually set up in a group. So the idea is we would create this group, and then we can add radio buttons to this group, and the user can select one radio button from that group. Now, let's say the user decides to select a different radio button. Well, then we would unselect the first one. So we're saying here that we can only pick one option among these set of options when we're dealing with radio buttons. In fact, we can actually have multiple radio buttons in a group. We can have multiple radio button groups in a form. You can have like 2, 3, or 4 different groups. Each of them can have however many radio buttons you want. The idea is with each group, you can select one and only one radio button from that group. Here's an example of a group with radio buttons. In fact, we have 3 different radio buttons in this group. We have one button that's called Choice 1, we have another one that's called Choice 2, and the other one is called Choice 3. And in this example, notice that Choice 1 is currently selected. So we can tell which button is selected because there's the little blue ball circle thing inside the option. So we can see right here that when we click on that particular button, we can see the little blue circle thing that tells us that Choice 1 is currently selected. At this point, I wouldn't be able to select Choice 2 or Choice 3 without unselecting Choice 1. Here is the same example, but now let's suppose we click on Choice 2. What's going to happen is we'll unselect Choice 1, so we can see now if we look at Choice 1, it's no longer selected, there's no blue thing around it, but instead Choice 2 is now selected, and we can see that right here. So the point is, once again, when I have a set of radio buttons, I can only pick one of those buttons. If I click on another option, it's going to unselect the original one and select the new one. For each radio button, we can actually create a subroutine for it. This is pretty simple to do. So if we go to the Properties window after selecting a radio button, there should be an Events option. Now, if you can't find the Events option, it looks like a lightning bolt, like this image here. So if you find that, you'll find the Events option. And then under the Action category, there should be an event that's called Click. So what you want to do is select that option. And what this will do is it'll create a subroutine that will handle the event when the radio button is clicked. Now, there are other actions that you could perform. So if you do some other action, you would create a subroutine for that particular action. What we're going to be looking at is the event of clicking on a radio button, and then we can just simply decide what we do whenever we click on that radio button. So just to give an example of what the subroutine would look like, we'd have something like this. So we'd have private sub, RB1 click, so maybe RB1 is the name of that particular radio button. We would have a parameter that's a sender as an object, E as event args, we're not worried about those. And then we have the handles RB1.click. So if you remember before, we had this handles keyword before in our subroutines. RB1.click is the event of clicking on button RB1. And then inside the body of the method, or subroutine I should say, we can decide what we actually do when we click on that particular button. Let's take a look at just a couple of quick subroutine examples just to show you what we can do with a radio button when we click on it. So here is one sub-procedure. It's the same one that we just showed in the last slide. So let's suppose we have a radio button which is called RB1, and we're handling the event of clicking on that. We can display a message box that says your choice is 1. So what this subroutine would do is whenever we click on the radio button, we would get a message box pop up that says your choice is 1. Now we can do this for other radio buttons as well. So for example, maybe I have a second radio button called RB2, and then if I were to go into all my options and then click on the event of clicking, I can create a subroutine for that radio button as well. And we can have a message box pop up that says your choice is 2 whenever we click on the second radio button. I can even do it a third time. Maybe I have a third radio button. Maybe it's called RB3. And then we would create a subroutine for the event of clicking on that radio button. And then whenever I click on it, I could have a message box appear that would say your choice is 3.
We'll now do an example of using radio buttons in our form. Here I'm using the same form from some of our much earlier examples, so you can either use that one and kind of clean it up a little bit, or if you just want to create your own project, that's perfectly fine. But what we're going to do is just add a couple of radio buttons, and then we're going to actually have a message box display whenever we click on one of those radio buttons. So the first thing we need to do is add some radio buttons. So we go to our toolbox, and if we scroll down, we should find radio buttons, or radio button. There we go. We're going to add 3 of these, and then we're going to move them down. Let's say right about here. This is pretty good. Yeah, that works. Now we're going to change some properties here. Instead of saying radio button 1, 2, and 3, I'm going to call them choice 1. And then we'll change, that's the text, and then we'll change the name, if I can find the name, to RB1. Okay, and then we'll do the same thing for the others. So the name here is going to be RB2. And we're going to change the text to choice 2. And then we're going to come to radio button 3, change the text to choice 3. And then we'll change the name to RB3. So now what we need to do is insert some code that would handle the event of clicking on a radio button. Now we have to be careful with this, because if I double click like how we normally do whenever we want to add a particular sub procedure, what we see is we handle the event of check changed. We don't want that. We don't want to handle the event where we do some kind of change with the property, because if we click on it, it changes, and if we click on something else, it also changes it. So we don't want this sub procedure. So we're going to get rid of that. Instead, what we're going to do is we will go to the events option in our properties window. So if you remember, we said that we find the lightning bolt. Here it is right here, and it actually says events. We're going to click on that. And these are all sorts of different events that we could write a sub procedure to handle for. So like behaviors, drag drops. We want to handle the click event. So this action is saying we are clicking on a radio button. So I'm going to double click on that, and this creates the sub procedure that we want. So what we're going to do here is, well, let's actually create the sub procedures for the others. So we're going to do this for all 3. So make sure we go to action, double click, click, and then we'll go down to choice 3 and do the same thing. Double click here. So here are the 3 sub procedures that are going to handle the event of clicking on radio button 1, radio button 2, and radio button 3. And what we're going to do here is just, we'll display a message box that says we picked a particular choice. So here I'm going to say message box.show, and then we'll say your choice is 1. Okay, and we're going to do the same thing for the other sub procedure. So I'm just going to copy and paste. So I'm just using Control-C for copy and Control-V for paste. You can use other approaches as well. And then here I'm going to change this to option 2 and change this one to a 3. So what that should do is whenever I click on radio button 1, I should get a message box that says your choice is 1. Whenever I click on radio button 2, it's going to say your choice is 2. And then whenever I click on radio button 3, it's going to say your choice is 3. So let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. Okay, so we automatically get the option that says or the message box that says your choice is 1. And that's because the way the radio buttons are set up is it's actually picked by, the first option is picked by default. So I'll go and click OK, and then we'll need to bring this back up so it's down here. So here we see that choice 1 is selected by default. So I can click on choice 2. We get the message box that says your choice is 2. And notice that what happens here is we're no longer able to select, well, we can select choice 1, but it's no longer selected. So I can only select one radio button at a time. Click on choice 3, it says your choice is 3. I can click on 1, I can click on 3. But whenever I click on a radio button, only one of these 3 radio buttons can be selected at any given time.